Today, we're diving into a really mind-bending idea from our source material. What if reality itself isn't some fixed, solid thing? What if it's actually a program? And if it is, can it be rewritten? Let's get into it.
So, think about this for a second. What if the reality we all share isn't as solid as it feels? What if it's more like a collective program, one that's being constantly written and rewritten by all of our minds working together? That's the huge question we're exploring today.
You know, the source material uses this incredible metaphor to help us wrap our heads around this. Picture reality as this massive ocean of infinite possibilities. Physicists actually have a name for this. They call it Hilbert space. Now, our shared experience is like a really strong current in that ocean, and that current is made up of a gigantic braided rope. So what are the threads in that rope? Well, each and every thread, that's an individual consciousness. All of us, woven together, creating the very fabric of what we call reality. Now, here's where it gets really fascinating. This whole idea connects directly to a classic philosophical concept, Plato's cave. If we're all weaving this reality together, but we're only seeing the information that's fed to us, the news, the official stories, are we really seeing the truth? Or are we just like those prisoners, mistaking the shadows on the wall for the real thing? So, that leads to a pretty big question, right? If we're all just watching shadows on a wall, then who is casting those shadows?
To dig into this, we have to look at the work of Dr. John Lilly. He had this wild concept of the human mind as a biocomputer. He said it runs on programs, just like a regular computer, things like our beliefs and our habits. But here's the kicker. He believed we could metaprogram ourselves, that we could literally step outside of our own programming and rewrite our own code.
Okay, so if one person can metaprogram their own mind, what happens when you scale that up? If you think of all of our minds as this giant network of biocomputers, who might be acting as the metaprogrammers for all of society? Who's writing the scripts that, maybe without even realizing it, we all end up following? Well, the source material we're looking at points a finger at a few very powerful think tanks as potential metaprogrammers. It specifically calls out these three, arguing that because they bring together the world's most influential leaders from media, industry, and government, they have the power to create a single, unified narrative that shapes pretty much everything.
And let's take a quick look at who we're talking about. You've got the Council on Foreign Relations, which has been shaping U.S. foreign policy for over 100 years. Then there's the Bilderberg Group, which has been holding these super-secret, off-the-record meetings with global elites since the 50s. And the Trilateral Commission, created to sync up the major global powers. The source suggests that by getting all their powerful members on the same page, these groups can basically control the information that you and I see every day.
So this all sounds pretty abstract, right? How does this metaprogramming actually work in the real world? Well, the source gives us a really powerful case study, the complete transformation of modern medicine.
And the main character in this story is John D. Rockefeller. Back in the early 20th century, his company, Standard Oil, was cranking out all these petrochemical byproducts. According to the source, Rockefeller saw a golden opportunity to create a brand new market for these waste products by turning them into synthetic, patentable drugs.
This timeline shows the alleged playbook. The absolute key moment was in 1910 with something called the Flexner Report. It was funded by Rockefeller's own foundations, and it created these new scientific standards for medical schools. The result? It was immediate and it was brutal. Schools that were teaching other approaches, like herbalism or homeopathy, they were shut down, just like that. And this cleared the way for a whole new system of medicine, one built entirely around pharmaceuticals.
And I mean, the shift was just massive. Before this report, medicine was this diverse landscape. Natural remedies, plant-based medicine, that was all mainstream. But afterwards, a single model became dominant. Anything outside of that was systematically relabeled as quackery and pushed to the fringe. You could say a whole new program for medicine had been successfully installed. Okay, so what's the long-term fallout from this reprogramming? What happens when you build a medical system that, as the source argues, puts patentable products ahead of natural ones? The source has this really catchy phrase for it. Don't believe the hype, it's a sequel. And the idea here is that the very same playbook that was used to reshape medicine 100 years ago is still being used today to shape our beliefs and our choices. And that brings us to a really heavy question. What has the cost been?
If you have a system that pushes aside holistic, preventative, and natural approaches in favor of a pill for every ill model, what are the negative consequences? Well, the source points to one devastatingly stark number to make its point: the opioid crisis. It's a crisis fueled by a for-profit pharmaceutical model, and it led to over 108,000 overdose deaths in the US in just 1 year. And it goes even deeper than that. The material talks about iatrogenic harm. That's a fancy term for negative health outcomes that are actually caused by medical treatment. The argument is that by suppressing all these holistic and preventative traditions, this new paradigm might have led to a huge rise in chronic illness and preventable deaths, an impact that is absolutely massive but almost impossible to truly measure. So after looking at all of these powerful forces out there in the world, the source material does something really important. It turns the camera right back around and puts the focus on a much more personal level. And it leaves us with this final, absolutely crucial question. In a world full of competing stories and incredibly powerful influences, who is ultimately in charge of programming your mind? If your consciousness is one thread in that great braided rope of reality, how consciously are you choosing to weave it?